Nada. Hello. So there is a question that gets asked a lot in philosophy, and I've asked myself this question at times. I think anybody who does philosophy long enough asks this question. And the answer to it is it depends. Like sometimes yes, sometimes no. You can stop watching now. But if you want to hear why it's sometimes yes, sometimes no, there are good reasons why it's sometimes yes, sometimes no. The question is philosophy useless? Yes, it can be, because the subjects or like the topics of philosophy, like when people have in mind philosophy, they tend to think of metaphysics, and metaphysics can be pretty useless. William James, in his book Pragmatism, or like one of his essays on pragmatism, said like he came back from a sabbatical and saw professors of metaphysics debating whether something was a tree or not, and he couldn't find it like more strange and like silly. And that's why he was like a pragmatist, one of the reasons why he was a pragmatist. There's another side of philosophy, like epistemology, that can be more useful, especially when it comes to like legal systems. I find epistemology super useful, because at least in America, what happens is they'll do this phraseology, treat like cases alike, and they usually use analogies to establish what are considered like cases. And in those situations, what sets the standards is like an epistemological worldview, and who determines the standards are obviously just whoever's in power. So might makes right, but then from there on, once the standards are set, once we get past the official might makes right, everybody uses the same standards, relatively speaking. It's not perfect, there are tons of flaws, I know that. But in that sense, then epistemology can be useful. Metaphysics, however, not so much. For example, think of like solipsism and realism, or like the idea that there's a subject and an object, and that there's only subjects. There are no genuine solutions to these worldviews. There are complicated reasons as to why I believe that is the case, but these two worldviews have been battling each other for thousands of years. Right? People have been saying that when I look at a tree, it is an object and I am a subject. And then when a solipsist says they look at a tree, it's just a representation in their mind that's being produced by their mind. Schopenhauer's like will to existence, you could say. There are no solutions to that, and people think that that's a useless discussion when they talk about like philosophy. And in that sense, yeah, philosophy can be useless. But at the same time, metaphysics is useful to understand at the very least. On the one hand, I think everybody should study it at some point, because if you're not even aware of what metaphysics is, then you probably can't even like label something as, like if you're not even aware of what something is, how could you possibly label it useless, right? Because you can't even reasonably identify it, so you therefore don't even know if it's useless. So in that sense, study it, at least do some critical thinking with it, and it's good, like a little bit of an exercise. But on the other hand, there are secondary conclusions that come from metaphysical worldviews, and I find, for me, there is utility in being able to identify the metaphysical presuppositions that people adopt, because it helps me understand their worldview and their reasoning much better. And a lot of the times people naively presuppose their metaphysics rather than establish it. The best one is usually, as an example, naive realism. Take the notion of subject and object, okay? Or subject and object, that should be the hand motion. Subject, and like the object can be a chair. I'll say the chair's existence is a brute fact, and me saying I like the chair is a value, or like that chairs are honorable tools to have. This would be like a value position. So there's a separation between facts and values. Facts are of the world, values are of the people. That kind of that's a secondary conclusion that stems from the initial worldview of naive realism, or like realism, that there are subjects and objects, okay? If you don't understand metaphysics, then you might agree with the fact-value separation and not realize that the person who is asserting the fact-value separation is doing it on a naive realist basis, or like a realist basis. And so not being able to understand that, I think, is a detriment to you as a person. And you would be shocked how many people presuppose metaphysics. The same thing happens with debates about causation, and what is a true cause and what is a sufficient cause. The same thing happens with religion, and I think it's usually called Christian presuppositionalism, that knowledge is dependent on an all-knowing being, and that all-knowing being gives you divine revelation. In order to understand these arguments with any complexity and understand the people who you're dealing with, you need to understand metaphysics. Now, another thing that comes into play with philosophy is ethics, and to be honest, this is usually the point, like, the 2 points that people give that are a strong, okay, philosophy is useful is ethics and a theory. I don't think theory matters when it comes to like scientific endeavors. I've always given this example that if you have a creationist and a evolutionary theorist, if both of them have mutually exclusive explanations but make the same set of predictions, I only care about their predictions. That's always been my stance. If the predictions are good, then that's great. I actually don't think the predictions even justify the theory. I think the theory is always going to be like this completely separate thing, and no standard of evidence can demonstrate it to be epistemically certain. And therefore, I only care about the predictions that you're making. And the predictions are what's going to determine the utility. The other thing is like ethics. With ethics, people say, oh, philosophy is useful because of ethics. But again, like I give this example where if you have two people, one's like a moral realist and one's like an anti-realist, say that morals are like errors, they don't exist or whatever. As long as they both follow the same social behaviors that I find preferable, I don't care about their morals. So if one says we don't steal because stealing is immoral, and the other person says I don't steal because it's my preference not to steal, in both cases that's fine. As long as we're not stealing, I don't care about your ethics. I care about the actual, again, the concrete behaviors of the world in front of me, in the same way that like when it comes to science, I care about the concrete predictions about the world that you're going to make. So I actually don't think it's that ethics or theory that make philosophy useful, because people will be like, scientists, you critique philosophy, but you do philosophy while you're theorizing. Sure, they do, like in the sense that like these hard separations between philosophy and science aren't meaningful because it's just human brains doing reasoning in both cases. It tends to be that one set of reasoning is more oriented towards predictions and one set of reasoning is oriented more towards categorization and justification. But they're both humans doing the same kind of thing using the same neural networks. You can make that argument, but at the end of the day, like, I don't care about scientific theory, and I don't care about ethics because I care about the actions. So to the answer to this question, this grand, wonderfully, amazingly asked question, is philosophy useless? The answer is yes and no. It's just going to depend on the circumstances and how you use it, which kind of holds true for virtually or nearly everything that I've ever seen in life. So I hope this video was helpful. If you guys want me to talk more about topics like this, it's not just books, although there are books in the background, lovely little gems. Let me know. I used to do this before, now I don't, but I'm going to try doing it again. If you guys want me to talk about these subjects, let me know. Yeah, with that being said, okay, bye-bye. Görüşürüz.